My wife set me up to test my loyalty, now I don't know if I can ever trust her again. I'd been looking forward to this work trip for weeks. It wasn't that I didn't love my wife, Emma, I did, but the weight of everything at home had been slowly building. It was like a slow leak in a dam. Little arguments, strange tension, the way she'd watch me out of the corner of her eye, as if waiting for me to mess up. Maybe a few days away in Chicago would give both of us a chance to breathe, to hit the reset button. When Emma dropped me off at the airport, I noticed her hug wasn't as warm as usual. Her lips brushed mine in a kiss that felt distant, like she wasn't fully there. We exchanged the usual "I love you" and "have a good trip," but something about it felt forced. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something on her mind, something she wasn't telling me. Chicago was the usual whirlwind: meetings, deadlines, presentations. I barely had time to think, which was good. For the first day or two, I threw myself into work, glad to have the distraction. But then, that evening, after wrapping up dinner with some colleagues, I got a text from Emma that stopped me in my tracks. "Hey babe, my friend's sister Sophie is in Chicago. She's at a hotel nearby. Thought it might be fun if you two grabbed a drink, catch up." I stared at the screen for a moment. Sophie. I remembered her vaguely from a party a few years ago. She was Emma's friend's younger sister, tall, blonde, striking. The kind of woman you noticed when she walked into a room. I hadn't thought much of her back then, but now Emma was suggesting I go out for drinks with her? It felt strange. But I didn't want to make it into something it wasn't. After all, Emma knew Sophie. If she trusted her, then why shouldn't I? Sure, I texted back. If she's around, I could meet her for a quick drink. A few minutes later, Emma responded with a cheerful, "Great. She's at your hotel bar now. Have fun." When I entered the hotel bar later that evening, I spotted Sophie immediately. She stood out in the crowd like a beacon, tall, her blonde hair shining under the dim lighting. She wore a black dress that seemed to defy gravity, clinging to her in a way that was impossible to ignore. I mentally steeled myself, knowing this might be a bit more than the casual drink Emma had suggested. "James." Sophie called out, flashing a radiant smile as she waved me over. Her tone was bright, friendly, but there was something in her eyes, a playful gleam that made me feel uneasy. "Sophie, long time no see," I said, trying to keep things light. I wasn't about to let myself get caught up in anything here. I was married, and I loved Emma, no matter how rocky things had been lately. We exchanged small talk, catching up on life and work. Sophie laughed at all the right moments, her hand brushing my arm more than once, lingering just a little too long. I tried to ignore it, but it wasn't easy. She was attractive, and I was only human. Still, nothing had happened, yet. "So," she said after our drinks arrived, leaning in slightly. Her perfume was strong, a sweet, heady scent that seemed to cloud the air between us. "Emma's really lucky to have you, you know. She talks about you all the time. Says you're the perfect husband." I chuckled awkwardly. "Perfect? I'm not sure about that." Sophie tilted her head, her eyes locking onto mine in a way that felt intentional. "Oh, come on. You're smart, successful, good-looking. I mean, if you weren't married to my sister's best friend, you'd be every woman's dream." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I tried to laugh it off. "Yeah, well, I am married," I said, my voice a little too firm, hoping she'd catch the hint. Sophie didn't back down. In fact, she leaned in closer, her hand resting on mine. "But you know, not every guy stays faithful. I've seen it happen a lot. You wouldn't believe the stories I could tell you." My heart rate kicked up. There was no mistaking it now, this wasn't just playful banter. Sophie was hitting on me, and hard. "You don't seem like the type though," she said, her fingers lightly tracing a pattern on the back of my hand. "I bet you're loyal, but everyone has their limits, right?" The knot in my stomach tightened into something sharper. I pulled my hand away, trying to stay calm. "Sophie, I'm loyal to Emma. This isn't." She interrupted me, her voice low and sultry. "I'm not saying you do anything. But sometimes it's fun too. Flirt with temptation, isn't it? No harm in just seeing where the night goes." This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. I felt trapped, my mind racing as I tried to figure out how to handle this without blowing up into something bigger than it already was. I glanced around the bar, hoping for a way out, but the crowd was dense, and leaving abruptly would only raise questions. "I don't think Emma would appreciate this kind of talk," I said, forcing a smile, trying to make light of it. Sophie smiled back, but it wasn't the same. It was calculated. Cold. Emma doesn't have to know, does she? Her words hit me like a slap. I felt the room spin slightly as I realized exactly what was happening. Sophie wasn't just flirting, she was testing me. Pushing me. Seeing how far she could take it. And the worst part? A small voice in the back of my mind whispered that maybe Emma had something to do with this. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I think I've had enough for tonight. Sophie raised an eyebrow, still smiling, as if she hadn't just crossed a line. Leaving so soon? We've barely started. I ignored the comment, gathering my things. Tell Emma I said hi. Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the bar, my mind reeling. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Emma's number. It rang twice before she picked up. Hey, babe, she said, her voice light. How's everything going? Sophie, I said, my voice tight. What's going on? Why is she acting like this? Did you know about this? There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, telling silence. Emma?
I didn't think it would go this far, she whispered, her voice barely audible.
I just wanted to see if you'd be tempted, James. I didn't think you'd actually do anything, but I had to know. You what? My voice was louder than I intended, drawing a few glances from people passing by in the hotel lobby. I'm sorry, she said quickly, her voice panicked. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. I've just been feeling so insecure lately, and I thought if I could see for myself that you wouldn't cheat, then maybe I'd feel better. I was speechless. The realization that this wasn't just Sophie flirting but an orchestrated test by my own wife slammed into me with the force of a freight train. I felt sick, betrayed, humiliated. You asked your friend's sister to come on to me? To test me? I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. I just wanted to know if I could trust you, Emma cried, her voice breaking on the other end of the line. And this was your solution? A setup? How could you think this was okay? My chest felt tight, my pulse racing. I had trusted Emma, but now? How could I trust her after this? I'm so sorry, James, Emma sobbed. Please, I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't think. No, I interrupted. You didn't think. You didn't talk to me. You went behind my back and tried to manipulate me. I can't. I need to think. I'll call you later. I hung up, my hands shaking as I stood in the lobby, trying to process everything. The betrayal cut deep, not because Sophie had flirted with me but because the woman I loved, the woman I thought I could trust, had orchestrated the whole thing. I walked back to my room in a daze, trying to make sense of it all, but nothing made sense. All I knew was that my marriage, the foundation I thought was solid, had just cracked wide open. And I wasn't sure how, or if, it could be repaired. I stared at the hotel room ceiling for what felt like hours after hanging up on Emma. The sick feeling of betrayal wouldn't leave my stomach. I replayed everything over and over in my head, Sophie's advances, Emma's confession, and it only made me feel worse. How had we ended up here? A few months ago, Emma and I had seemed fine. Sure, we'd had our arguments like any couple, but nothing like this. I hadn't realized she'd been festering with insecurities this deeply. And instead of coming to me, instead of talking about her feelings, she'd conspired behind my back, sending Sophie to flirt with me as a test. How could she think this was okay? The anger pulsed through me in waves, but underneath it all, there was hurt. Emma hadn't trusted me enough to come to me with her fears. I had always been loyal to her, never even considering cheating, and yet she'd decided to manipulate me, treating our relationship like some twisted game. I had to get out of the room. I needed air, space, something to clear my head. I grabbed my coat and left the hotel, wandering aimlessly through the streets of downtown Chicago. The city was bustling, lights reflecting off the tall glass buildings, but everything felt muted, distant, like I was watching the world from inside a bubble. As I walked, my phone buzzed in my pocket, another call from Emma. I ignored it, but soon after, a text came through. Please, James, let's talk. I love you. I'm so sorry. I need you to know that. I wanted to respond, but I wasn't sure what I could say right now that wouldn't be fueled by anger. How could she claim to love me and then do something so manipulative? I needed time. I wandered the streets for a while longer before finally stopping at a small park. I sat down on a bench, staring at the fountain in front of me. The sound of the water helped calm me, and I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of my emotions. Part of me wanted to call Emma and yell at her. Part of me wanted to go back to the hotel, pack my things, and head home, without telling her. But another part of me, the part that still loved her despite everything, wondered if maybe This could be fixed. Could we somehow move past this? The next morning, after another sleepless night, I called Emma. She answered on the first ring. "James," she said, her voice hoarse from crying, "please, can we talk?" I let out a slow breath, feeling the tension building again. "We're talking now, Emma. But I still can't believe you thought this was okay." "I know," she said quickly, sniffling. "I know it was wrong. I've been going over it in my head all night, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I hurt you. She took a deep breath. "I've been so scared, James. I see all these stories, all these people around us, and I got paranoid that maybe, one day, you'd leave me for someone else. So instead of trusting me, you set me up?" I said, my voice sharp. "Do you realize how messed up that is? I've always been faithful to you. I've never given you a reason to doubt me, Emma." I know, she sobbed. "I didn't think you'd do anything. I swear, I needed to see it for myself, to know I wasn't going crazy. I was so insecure, and instead of talking to you, I panicked and did something horrible." I rubbed my forehead, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "Emma, trust is everything in a marriage. What you did, how am I supposed to trust you now? How do I know this won't happen again?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she spoke, her voice small and broken. "You don't. I know I've broken your trust, and I don't know how to fix it. But I want to try. I love you, James. I'll do anything to make this right." I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest deepening. I believed her. I believed that she regretted what she'd done, but that didn't erase the hurt. That didn't undo the fact that she had violated the trust I thought we had. "I don't know if I can get past this, Emma," I said, my voice softer now. "I need time." "I understand," she whispered. "I'll give you whatever time you need. I hope you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." We hung up shortly after that, and I spent the rest of my trip in a haze of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, love. I kept thinking about our marriage, about the good times, but the memory of Sophie's flirtation, and Emma's betrayal, overshadowed it all. When I returned home a few days later, I still hadn't made a decision. I hadn't moved back into our home either. Emma had texted me several times, apologizing, pleading for me to come home, but I kept my distance. I stayed with a friend, giving myself space to think. Eventually, I agreed to meet her at a counselor's office. I didn't know if we could fix this, but I owed it to our marriage to at least try. Emma had crossed a line, but if we were going to make this work, we needed help. Our first session was tense. Emma cried almost the entire time, and I tried to keep my emotions in check, explaining to the counselor how I felt, how Emma's actions had made me feel like she didn't trust me at all. "I can't keep apologizing enough," Emma said tearfully. "I'm working on myself, I've been seeing a therapist. I know what I did was wrong. But I love James, and I don't want to lose him because of my mistake." Dr. Mathis, our counselor, nodded. "It's important to acknowledge your actions, Emma. But it's also important to focus on rebuilding trust, if that's what both of you want. This process will take time, and it will require patience." It wasn't easy. Every time we talked, I felt the sting of betrayal creeping up on me, and some days, I wondered if it was even worth trying to fix things. But Emma was making an effort, and part of me wanted to believe we could come out of this stronger. Months passed, and slowly, the anger started to fade. Emma had been working hard on herself, going to therapy, learning how to communicate her fears instead of letting them control her. We continued seeing Dr. Mathis, and while it wasn't perfect, we were making progress. One evening, we were sitting together on the couch, watching TV in silence. It was a small, normal moment, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm. Emma reached over, her fingers brushing against mine. "I love you, James," she said softly. I looked at her, my heart still carrying the weight of everything that had happened, but for the first time, I could see a way forward. "I love you too," I said. "We're getting there. It's going to take time, but I think we can make this work." And in that moment, I knew it was true. Trust had been broken, but with time, patience, and effort, it could be rebuilt. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed these Reddit stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.